Everyone loves to listen to a good book, and there are so many wonderful ones to choose, so we decided to bring you this podcast of Stories Come to Life. Each episode features a story from either classic or modern literature, especially chosen to be interesting and exciting to hear. So sit back, relax, and listen to this story come to life. Welcome to Stories Come to Life. I am your host, Kathryn Lopez Luker. In 1930, the first 3 books in the Nancy Drew series were published at the same time in order to introduce the world to this brilliant young detective. The Bungalow Mystery is the 3rd of Nancy's adventures. In this episode, we find Nancy Drew and her chum, Helen Corning, who also appeared in the previous adventures, spending time at a camp on the shores of Moon Lake. Another girl, the brave but dejected Laura Pendleton, soon makes their acquaintance. Laura is very interested in hearing about Nancy's success in solving mysteries, but Laura has her own troubles and longs very much for Nancy and Helen's company as she faces her fears. Now sit back, relax, and listen to this story come to life. Nancy Drew, The Bungalow Mystery. Chapter 1. Racing the Storm. Don't you think we should turn back, Helen? It's getting dreadfully dark out here on the lake, and I don't like the look of those big black clouds. As Nancy Drew addressed her chum, Helen Corning, she gazed anxiously up at the sky, and then out across a long expanse of water to the distant shore. The 2 girls were spending several days at a camp located on Moon Lake, and on this particular afternoon they had slipped away for a delightful motorboat outing. They had cruised aimlessly about for several hours, enjoying the lake scenery and, particularly, a cool, refreshing breeze, which brought them relief from an unseasonably torrid day, for it was early summer. Now, as Nancy studied the sky for the first time, she was alarmed to notice that it had become overcast. "Helen, I'm afraid there's going to be a storm," she announced. "They come up so quickly on Moon Lake." "You're right," Helen agreed uneasily. "It does look threatening. I didn't realize we were so far from shore. We'd better get back to camp as fast as we can." "I guess we were having too good a time to notice the weather," Nancy said. She gave the steering wheel a turn and headed the motorboat toward the eastern shore. Although it was not yet dusk, darkness seemed to be closing in upon the lake. It was with difficulty that the girls distinguished the shoreline. The water, which only a few minutes before had been a smooth, clear blue, lashed about the little boat in angry, inky waves. Helen studied the sky nervously. "We'd better make full speed ahead, Nancy," she advised. "We're a long way from camp, and that big cloud is rolling up fast." Nancy Drew was of the same opinion. One hasty glance at the cloud in question had assured her that there was no time to be lost, if they were to beat the storm. Even before Helen had made the suggestion, she had opened the throttle to the fullest extent. The motorboat fairly leaped through the water, dashing spray into the faces of the 2 girls. "Why didn't we start back a few minutes earlier?" Helen groaned. "We'll be drenched to the skin before we reach shore." "I'm afraid we shall," Nancy admitted. "I wonder if there are any oilskins aboard." "They may be under the seat. I'll look and see if I can find them." A moment later, Helen triumphantly brought out a mass of sticky yellow garments. She quickly slipped into a coat, and then relieved her chum at the wheel, giving her an opportunity to don the oilskins. Hastily, Nancy pulled a sou'wester down over her curly golden bob, and struggled into a coat several sizes too large for her. She was not an instant too soon, for suddenly a streak of forked lightning cut across the sky, momentarily disclosing a thick mass of ugly clouds. The lightning was followed by an ominous crack of thunder, which caused the girls to cower involuntarily. "That was close," Helen murmured uncomfortably. "It's just a taste of what's coming," Nancy cried. "The storm is almost upon us." The wind, which had been steadily freshening, now began to blow in earnest. It struck the boat with a force which caused Nancy to grasp the railing for support. Huge waves swept down upon the little craft, threatening to bury it. Another dazzling flash of lightning illuminated the sky, and simultaneously a deluge of rain descended upon the unfortunate girls. "Oh, this is terrible," Helen wailed. "I can't see to steer." Nancy sprang to a position directly behind her chum and peered ahead into the darkness. As though by magic, the shoreline had vanished. The blinding rain made it impossible to see more than a few feet beyond the bow. "Hold to your present course," she advised, shouting to make herself heard above the noise of the storm. "It can't rain like this for long." The gallant little motorboat plowed defiantly through the waves, but the steady chug of its engine did not comfort the two girls. They knew that they were miles from camp, and should anything go wrong with the motor, they would be entirely at the mercy of the waves. Nancy recalled that she had noticed only one fishing boat on the lake during the afternoon, and the knowledge that in case of an accident, cries for help would go unheard did not add to her peace of mind. However, so long as the engine continued to labor faithfully, there was no need to worry. "How much gasoline have we left?" Helen inquired anxiously. "Oh, at least half a tank, Helen. We shan't need to worry on that score." After a time, the rain ceased to fall in torrents, and a drizzle set in. However, the storm was by no means over, for the wind continued to blow a full gale, and every instant it seemed to Nancy Drew and Helen Corning that the waves became higher. "If only we could see where we're going," Helen complained. She had endeavored to maintain a straight course for the camp, but there was no way of estimating the amount of drift, and she had no idea how far they were from shore. A jagged ribbon of lightning illuminated the path ahead. Catching her breath, Nancy Drew leaned forward and peered into the inky water. What she saw froze her with horror. Directly ahead floated a big log. "About!" Nancy cried frantically. Helen, too, had seen the log, which lay in the path of the motorboat, and the sight held her with a paralysis of fright. She froze to the wheel. "About!" Nancy shouted again. Helen gave the wheel a vicious turn. The boat responded, but not quickly enough. The log loomed up in the water ahead. With a splintering crash, the boat struck it. The sudden impact of the blow threw Nancy Drew backwards. She went sprawling into the bottom of the boat. Helen, who still clung to the steering wheel, screamed in fright. "Nancy, are you hurt?" she demanded fearfully. Nancy did not respond, but hastily scrambled to her feet. With difficulty she managed to stand, for the boat listed sharply to the right. Instantly she saw that the collision with the log had torn a jagged hole in the side of the craft. Water was pouring in through it. "Quick!" Nancy ordered sharply. "We must bail or we'll sink." She sprang forward and, tearing off her coat, tried to stuff it into the hole. Helen caught up a rusty pail, which had been kept on hand for fish bait, and began to bail. She worked madly, but in spite of her efforts, the water came in faster than she could dip it out. "Oh, it's no use," she groaned. "We're sinking." Nancy, too, realized that they could not hope to stop the leak. The boat was doomed, and they with it, unless aid came to them quickly. "Shout for help," she ordered. "Someone may hear us." Cupping their hands to their lips, The girls shouted again and again. "Help! Help!" they screamed desperately. There was no answer. The wind howled derisively in their ears, mocking them in their plight. "Oh, what shall we do?" Helen demanded hopelessly. Already, the two girls were standing in water over their ankles, and each instant the boat was settling lower. A big wave bore down upon them, and Nancy, who saw it coming, realized that it meant the end. A deluge of water poured in over the sides. "We're lost!" Helen cried. "We're lost!" The words ended in a choking gurgle as the waters closed over her head. Chapter 2. A Desperate Struggle. As the motorboat settled into the lake, Nancy Drew leaped clear and began to tread water. Her first thought was for her chum. What had become of her? Nancy Drew was an excellent swimmer, but as Nancy knew, Helen Corning was barely able to keep herself afloat in a quiet pool. With crushing, smothering waves bearing down upon her, she would be helpless. Frantically, Nancy glanced about. She heard no cry, but several yards away she thought she saw a white hand above the water. With powerful crawl strokes, she plowed through the waves toward the spot. The hand had vanished. Bending at the waist and then suddenly straightening her body, Nancy shot down in a surface dive. With eyes open, she groped about underwater. At last she was forced to the surface, gasping for breath. "Oh, I must find her," she thought desperately. "I can't let her drown." Then, only a few feet ahead, she saw her chum struggling. In her fright, Helen had forgotten what little she knew about swimming, and was thrashing madly about. One powerful stroke brought Nancy directly behind her chum. Reaching out an arm, she hooked Helen under the chin, and with her free hand, elevated her body to the surface of the water. A huge wave bore down upon the girls, and before Nancy could secure a safe hold, Helen strangled and began to struggle. She clutched Nancy about the neck. "Let go!" Nancy cried. "Let go!" Helen, too frightened to realize what she was doing, only clung the tighter, carrying the two girls beneath the surface of the water. At first, panic took possession of Nancy Drew as she realized that Helen held her in a stranglehold. Then her mind cleared, and she thought logically again. She had studied life-saving methods and had been told how to break strangleholds. If only it would work now. In a desperate attempt to free herself, she pushed with her hands against the side of her chum's face, at the same time attempting to raise one of the arms which imprisoned her. As she felt Helen's grip relax, she quickly ducked under the raised arm and came to the surface of the water directly behind her chum. Before Helen could clutch her again, Nancy snapped her into position for a safe carry. "Don't struggle, or we'll both drown," she warned Helen. Feeling that she was safe, Helen relaxed somewhat. But scarcely had Nancy Drew begun to believe that she had her chum under control when a huge wave swept over the two girls. Again Helen began to struggle and fight. Although Nancy held her in a position from which she could not free herself, the battle was a wearing one. "Hold your breath when you see a wave coming," Nancy instructed. "Don't be afraid. I won't let loose of you." She knew that Helen would soon wear her out, unless she overcame her fear and remained quiet. Already Nancy was short of breath, and for a swimmer far from shore, that was a fatal warning. Yet never for a moment did she consider abandoning Helen, although by doing so she might save her own life. Nancy Drew had no illusions concerning her situation. Excellent swimmer though she was, she knew it would be impossible to tow Helen ashore. Alone she might make it, but with her chum to consider it was hopeless. If only she could manage to keep Helen afloat until help reached them. The motorboat had sunk beneath the waves, and the log, which might have given them temporary support, had floated away into the darkness. Oh, if only that log would come in sight again, thought Nancy. As if in answer to her wish, the log bobbed up at that instant. But before Nancy could grab hold of it, it went out of sight. She watched eagerly, but it failed to reappear. The exhausted girl's heart sank within her. "Help!" Nancy cried frantically. With a sinking heart, she realized that her voice would not carry far. She and her chum were at the mercy of the cruel waves. In this moment, when it seemed that there was no hope of rescue, it was but natural that Nancy Drew's thoughts should turn to her father. Would she ever see him again? For the most part, Nancy's life had been an unusually happy one. Since the death of her mother many years before, she had lived with her father, Carson Drew, a noted lawyer engaged largely on mystery cases, in the middle western city of River Heights, which was 40 miles from Moon Lake. Aided by an elderly servant, Hannah Gruen, Nancy had taken over the direction of the household. Her life had been an exciting one, for she had always taken an interest in her father's mystery cases. Carson Drew was proud of his daughter and openly boasted that she had a talent for unearthing mysteries and solving baffling cases. Certainly, Nancy Drew never missed an opportunity for a thrilling adventure. She had established herself as a clever detective by solving the mystery of a queer old clock. Her adventures in this connection are related in the first volume of the series, entitled The Secret of the Old Clock. Later, she had been involved in a rather weird mystery, one which carried her to a haunted house, there to aid two sisters, Rosemary and Floretta Turnbull. Nancy had discovered a hidden staircase, and it was through her efforts that the ghost of the Turnbull mansion was captured. Her exciting adventures are recounted in the volume The Hidden Staircase. Nancy had refused to accept a reward for her service, but in each case her friends had forced a token of remembrance upon her. Her trophies consisted of a mantel clock and a valuable silver urn. Her father often declared that before she finished her career, she would have the house cluttered. Now, as Nancy Drew struggled to support her chum in the rough waters of Moon Lake, she wondered if her career was to come to a sudden end. How long could she manage to keep afloat? Certainly not for many more minutes. Her heavy clothing dragged her down. Her shoes seemed as heavy as chunks of lead. If only she could let loose of Helen for a minute, she could remove them. "Can you float on your back for just a few minutes?" she asked. "Oh, don't let go of me, Nancy," Helen pleaded. "I'm frightened to death." "I won't," Nancy promised. She intended to remain with her chum until the end. After all, it did not greatly matter about the shoes, she told herself. Even were she rid of them, it would only prolong her time a few minutes. She could not hope to support Helen indefinitely. Each second dragged like an eternity. At frequent intervals, Nancy shouted for help, although she believed she was only wasting energy. Her breathing became increasingly difficult. Helen Corning, who had gradually grown more calm, could not help but know that Nancy's strength was beginning to fail. For the first time, she realized the sacrifice her chum was making. Encumbered as she was, she could never hope to reach shore. "Save yourself," she begged. "Go on without me." "Never." "You can reach shore alone, Nancy. If you try to save me, we'll both drown." Nancy knew that Helen spoke the truth, but she did not relax her hold. Nothing could force her to desert her chum. Each minute it seemed to her that she could not take another stroke, and yet, by sheer force of will, she managed to endure. A huge wave bore down upon the two girls, smothering them in its embrace. Feebly, Nancy struggled back to the surface with her burden. "One more like that, and I'll be through," she told herself. Just then, she thought she heard a noise above the roar of the wind. Was it her imagination, or had she really heard the splash of an oar? "Help!" she screamed. Was there really an answering cry, or were her ears playing cruel tricks upon her? Again, Nancy raised her voice in a frantic cry. This time, there could be no mistake, for she distinguished the words, "Hold on, I'm coming." Aid was coming at last. The thought gave Nancy Drew the courage to endure for a few minutes longer. "Where are you?" a shrill voice called. "Here, here!" Nancy cried desperately. Through the blinding rain, she caught a glimpse of a dark object. It was a rowboat. If only she could hold out until it reached her. As the rowboat approached, Nancy Drew fully expected to see it swamped. It swept toward the two girls on the crest of a wave, and only by dexterous use of the oars did the rescuer avoid crashing into them. There was only one occupant in the boat, a girl, and her puny strength availed but little against the wind and waves. Twice she tried to bring the boat alongside the struggling girls, and failed. The third time, as the craft swept past, Nancy lunged and caught the side. She dragged Helen along, supporting her with one hand until she too secured a hold. "Be careful, or you'll upset the boat," the rescuer shouted. Nancy Drew was well aware of the danger, and she was at a loss to know how to climb aboard. Unless the boat were perfectly balanced, it would be certain to capsize at the first attempt the girls made to scramble over the side. Swimming around the boat, Nancy Drew took a position directly opposite her chum. "I'll try to balance it while you get in," she shouted. As Helen attempted to scramble aboard, Nancy threw her weight to the opposite side. The craft wobbled uncertainly, but did not upset. With the aid of the girl at the oars, Helen managed to reach safety. It was more difficult to get Nancy into the boat, but at last she was dragged over the side. The deed accomplished, Helen collapsed on the bottom. Nancy resisted the temptation to drop down beside her chum, for one quick glance at her rescuer assured her that the girl was nearly exhausted from her labors. Apparently, it was all she could do to keep the rowboat from being overturned. Tired as she was, Nancy Drew knew that she could not rest until shore was reached. "Give me the oars," she ordered. "You rest for a moment or two." "I am about done up," the girl admitted. "When I heard your cries, I rowed out as fast as I could." Nancy dropped down upon the seat and snatched up the oars. "We couldn't have lasted much longer. You came just in time. But I won't try to thank you now. We're still in grave danger. Which way to shore?" With a wave of her hand, the girl indicated the direction. She seemed too tired to speak. Under Nancy Drew's powerful strokes, the little boat plunged through the water. By skillful use of her oars, Nancy avoided some of the waves. But in spite of her efforts, the craft was battered about. Each moment, the wind increased in violence, hurling wild threats into the ears of the three girls. Could they outride the storm? As the little boat was buffeted this way and that, it seemed to Nancy Drew that they were fighting a losing battle. The fear made her work more frantically than before. Chapter 3. A New Friend. Grimly, Nancy Drew applied herself to the oars, although she feared her efforts would be useless in the end. Her arms ached, and she was desperately tired. Chilled to the bone by the raw wind, hands numb with cold, She longed to give up the struggle. If only she could drop down in the bottom of the boat beside Helen and rest. Yet she could not give up, for she realized that the safety of her companions depended upon her work. She must keep on. As she doggedly bent to her task, the oars creaked protestingly in the locks. It seemed to Nancy that an unkind fate had decreed that the little boat was never to reach shore. For each instant the storm increased in violence. Gigantic waves lashed against the little craft, threatening to bury it. Each flash of lightning and clap of thunder struck the girls with terror. The strange girl, who had braved the elements to rescue Nancy Drew and Helen Corning, permitted herself only a brief rest. Exhausted as she was, she snatched up an extra oar from the bottom of the boat and attempted to help with the rowing. Working in unison, the two girls sent the little craft leaping through the water. As they made progress against the wind and waves, Nancy took new hope. "We'll make it," she encouraged her companion. A vivid flash of lightning illuminated the water, and directly ahead, through the rain, Nancy caught a glimpse of the shoreline. A feeling of intense relief surged over her. However, the battle was not yet won, for her companion shouted a sudden warning. "The rocks! We must be careful, or we'll be dashed against them." Scarcely were the words uttered when another flash of lightning disclosed the shoreline more distinctly, and straight ahead, the ugly protruding nose of a jagged rock. For an instant, Nancy's heart leapt into her throat. Would they be dashed on that cruel rock, over which the waves were dashing with hyacinth spray? "Oh, we'll be killed!" gasped the strange girl. To the left, came the quick answer. "It's our only hope." "We'll never make it," was the groaning reply. "We must." It was a critical moment, and Nancy Drew's heart was in her mouth. But with a deft swerve of her oar, she avoided the rock, and an oncoming wave swept them out of danger. Another 5 minutes, and they were in the cove, where the water was comparatively quiet. "Safe," Nancy murmured. At last her oars struck a sandy bottom, and promptly dropping them, she stepped out into the water, which reached nearly to her knees. Her fellow oarsmen followed, and together they pulled the boat up on the beach. Quickly they helped Helen Corning to her feet. She was too weak to stand without a supporting arm. "Oh, where are we?" Nancy cried desperately. "Isn't there some house near where we can take Helen?" "There isn't a cottage within a mile," the strange girl informed her. "But there's a boathouse up the shore a little way. If we can get her there—" "I can walk," Helen insisted weakly. Supported on either side, she bravely demonstrated the truth of her assertion. Shivering with cold and excitement, the 3 bedraggled girls stumbled along the beach. "Here we are," the stranger called out presently. Pausing before a well-built boathouse, which stood a short distance from the water's edge, she flung open the door. In relief, Nancy and Helen entered. "It's not a very comfortable place," the girl apologized, "but perhaps we can wait here until the storm is over. At least it's better than standing out in the rain." Following Nancy and Helen inside, she closed the door. "It's as dark as night," Helen complained. "I'll try to find a lamp," the girl returned. "I'm sure there must be one here." She groped about, and after a little search, found an oil lamp and a box of matches. "That's better," she declared as she placed the lighted lamp on the windowsill. "We can see one another now." Not without curiosity, Nancy Drew and Helen Corning surveyed their rescuer. She was a tall, slender girl, with delicately molded features and tragic brown eyes, which still held a look of fright. Her dress, a severe black, was unrelieved by any trimming, Yet, in spite of the simplicity of her drab garb, she was a pretty girl. "We haven't thanked you for saving our lives yet," Nancy began. "Why, we don't even know your name." "My name," the girl smiled. "I'm Laura Pendleton." Nancy quickly introduced herself and her chum. "It was fortunate for us that you came to our rescue when you did," she declared gratefully. "You heard our cries?" "Yes, I had gone out for a walk along the shore when the storm came up suddenly. I was hurrying back to the hotel when I heard a shout for help. There was no one nearby, and I didn't know what to do." Laura nervously twisted her hands as she spoke. "You found a boat?" Nancy prompted. "Yes, fortunately there was one on the beach, but I was afraid to attempt the rescue alone." "But you did," Nancy reminded her. "I don't wonder you were afraid to brave the storm." "Oh, it wasn't just the storm. I'm afraid of water. I always have been. I can't even swim." "You can't swim?" Nancy gasped. "And you risked your life to save us?" "There wasn't any other way," Laura stated quietly. "I couldn't let you drown." "Laura," Nancy said feelingly, "Helen and I can't begin to tell you how grateful we are for what you did. You displayed real courage in rescuing us." "It was splendid," Helen added. "Oh, I didn't do anything," Laura insisted. "I'm not very good at rowing a boat, and if luck hadn't been with me, I never would have reached you." "Do you live near here?" Nancy questioned curiously. A troubled expression passed over Laura Pendleton's face. "I'm staying at the Lakeside Hotel. It's about a mile from here." "You frequently take long walks?" Nancy encouraged her, for she sensed that something was worrying her new friend, and she hoped to draw out her story. "I do when I'm lonely and discouraged," Laura answered soberly. She hesitated a moment, and then added, "You see, I've recently lost my mother." "Oh," Nancy murmured gently, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to remind you. I should have known. I wanted to tell you. Sometimes it seems as though I must talk to someone. I'm so worried. There's no one to help or advise me." "Your father?" "He died nearly 6 years ago. I am an orphan." "Surely you have friends to whom you can appeal." "I'm afraid not. You see, Mother was ill for a number of years before she died. We lived in hotels and I took care of her. Our social life was cut off." "If there's any way that Helen and I can help, count on us," Nancy Drew announced firmly. "If you need money—" "Oh, it isn't money," Laura said quickly. "Mother left an ample fortune. It's only that I'm lonely and discouraged, and I don't know what my guardian will be like." "Your guardian?" Helen questioned curiously. "Yes, the court appointed Jacob Aborn. I've never seen him. He and my mother were schoolmates." "You dread to meet him?" Nancy asked gently. "Yes, he's to come for me in a few days." "Surely if he and your mother were schoolmates, you have no cause for worry." "I suppose I am silly," Laura admitted, "but I can't help it. I have the strangest feeling." "What sort of feeling?" Nancy asked. "Oh, I can't explain. It's just that I feel that something dreadful will happen to me. I'm afraid to meet Jacob Aborn." "Perhaps he's the most kindly man in the world," Nancy declared. "When will he arrive?" "That I don't know. I'm expecting him in the latter part of this week. I received a letter from him last week, telling me to wait at the Lakeside Hotel until he arrived. His letter was so curt and businesslike that it frightened me." "Oh, I'm sure everything will come out all right," Helen assured her kindly. "Oh, I'm probably worrying when there's no need," Laura said, forcing a smile. "You must pardon me for troubling you with my story." "But we're interested," Nancy Drew protested. "I wish we could help you." "Well, I don't need help yet," Laura laughed. "If I do, I'll probably call on you." By the way, I don't know where you live." "Oh, we're spending a few days at a summer camp here on the lake," Helen informed her. "Only a few days?" "We'll be leaving next week," Nancy replied. "At least I will. However, I live at River Heights, which is only 40 miles from here. I wish you could visit me there." "I'd love to come if my guardian will let me. And you must visit us at the camp," Helen added enthusiastically. "Why not come tomorrow afternoon?" "Perhaps I can if you really want me," Laura responded eagerly. "Of course we want you," Nancy declared cordially. "However, I warn you that the girls will mob you when they learn you're a heroine." Laura smiled timidly at her new friends. "Perhaps you'll visit me sometime at my hotel?" "We certainly will," Nancy assured her warmly. Helen glanced toward the window and for the first time noticed that it had stopped raining. "The storm is over," she announced. "Then I must be getting back to the hotel before I catch my death of cold." Laura shivered. "I'm chilled to the marrow." "So are we," Nancy commented. "This storm certainly brought cold weather with it. Won't you come with me to the hotel?" "Oh, no. We must strike off for camp. The girls will be worried about us." Nancy Drew said hastily. "Thank you for your kind offer. But you'll take cold in those wet clothes. The sun is coming out, so we'll probably dry off before we reach camp. Anyway, you have a walk of nearly a mile before you, and it isn't much farther to camp. Then if you won't come, I'll say goodbye." "Before we go, we want to thank you again for saving our lives," Nancy told her earnestly. "I can't thank you adequately, but if ever I can be of service, I hope you will call upon me." "I certainly will," Laura assured her easily. As the three girls gravely shook hands and parted, Nancy Drew little dreamed that before a fortnight had passed, she would be given an opportunity to repay Laura Pendleton in full. Chapter 4. A Visitor. "Do you think Laura Pendleton will visit us this afternoon, Nancy?" Helen Corning, who was reclining on a camp cot in the little cabin which she shared with Nancy Drew, asked the question. "I certainly hope so," Nancy responded. "I'd like to become better acquainted with that girl. She interests me. I wish we could repay her for saving our lives. I was so nearly done up yesterday afternoon that I didn't half thank her." "I'm afraid there's nothing we can do, Helen. She has a fortune in her own name, so money would mean nothing to her. However, I thought she seemed rather lonely." "Yes, she did," Helen agreed. "If she comes this afternoon, we must show her a good time. Perhaps we can make her forget her troubles." In spite of the severe exposure to which Helen and Nancy had been subjected the previous day, they were little the worse for their ducking in the lake. Upon reaching camp, they had removed their wet clothing and had gone to bed, with the result that they escaped without even a cold to remind them of their adventure. Although the motorboat was not a valuable one, the girls regretted its loss and had generously offered to pay for it. However, the camp counselors had refused their money, exonerating them of all blame for the accident. "I'm a little worried about Laura," Nancy Drew remarked to her chum. "She isn't at all strong-looking, and I'm afraid she may be ill." Helen did not reply, for just then a curly-headed girl thrust her head in at the cabin door and informed the two girls that they had a visitor. "Oh, it must be Laura," Nancy cried hopefully. Helen sprang up from the cot and with her chum rushed to the door. The girl who awaited them was indeed Laura Pendleton. "I'm so glad you came," Nancy greeted her enthusiastically. "Helen and I were just talking of you." "We were afraid you might be ill after that drenching," Helen added. "I'm really stronger than I appear." And Laura smiled pleasantly. "I was fortunate enough not to take cold." "We escaped too," Nancy declared, "and now you must meet all of the girls." Nancy Drew's friends crowded about and were quickly introduced to Laura. They made a great deal over her and insisted upon regarding her as a heroine. The praise made little impression upon the girl, it seemed to Nancy. She noticed that while Laura was gracious to everyone, she took little interest in what was going on about her. Something is troubling her, Nancy thought. At the urgent request of the campers, Laura joined in a lively game of volleyball, which was in progress, but it was evident that she was not really enjoying herself. Nancy decided that it was time to take a hand. "It's too warm to play volleyball," she informed her teammates. "Anyway, Helen and I haven't had a chance to talk with our guest." To Laura's evident relief, the two girls bore her triumphantly away to their cabin. "I'm afraid I'm dreadfully stupid at games," Laura apologized. "You see, I've never had an opportunity to enjoy sports." "You're not stupid in the least," Nancy assured her warmly. "Who wants to waste a whole afternoon batting a silly ball over a net? I'm sure I'd much rather talk." After politely presenting Laura with the only chair which the tiny cabin boasted, Nancy and Helen flopped down upon the cots. At first, the conversation was rather a two-sided one, for the visitor was somewhat shy, and it was evident that she was still unhappy over the death of her mother. In an effort to direct Laura's thoughts into more pleasant channels, Helen began to tell her of some of Nancy Drew's thrilling adventures. "She has quite a reputation as a detective," Helen declared impressively. "Everyone says Nancy can scent a mystery a mile away." "What sort of mystery cases are you interested in?" Laura asked her new friend in surprise. "Oh, most anything," Nancy answered carelessly. "My father is a lawyer who's often engaged in such cases, and I suppose I get my liking for detective work from him." "She makes a specialty of lost wills and haunted houses," Helen informed their guest mischievously. "Haunted houses?" Laura gasped. "Oh, the Turnbull mansion wasn't really haunted," Nancy hastened to explain. "The Turnbull sisters were bothered by strange noises at night, and valuables kept disappearing from the house. I discovered who it was that was the ghost behind the scenes." "Everyone said it was clever detective work," Helen went on proudly. "Nancy discovered a hidden staircase and an underground tunnel. She explored it in the dead of night." "How exciting!" Laura declared. "Weren't you afraid?" "A little," Nancy admitted truthfully. "But she kept on anyway," Helen continued. "Oh, she had a thrilling time of it before the mystery was solved." "I should think so," Laura murmured. "My, you must have talent, Nancy." "Not at all," Nancy laughed. "It was mostly luck that I stumbled upon that hidden staircase." "Don't you believe it," Helen scoffed. "Nancy Drew's modest, that's all. She wouldn't tell you about the way she helped the Horner girls get their inheritance. They had been cheated out of a fortune, and Nancy unearthed the real will." "Oh, Laura isn't interested in all that," Nancy protested, obviously ill at ease. "Indeed I am," Laura assured her. "We've been talking about ourselves so much that we haven't given you a chance to say a word." "Oh, there's nothing to tell about myself. I'm not a very interesting person." "Indeed you are," Nancy Drew contradicted her guest gently. "But I am afraid you're still worrying about that guardian of yours. Am I correct?" Laura's pretty face clouded. "Yes, I am worried. I know I shouldn't feel the way I do, for it was my mother's wish that Jacob Aborn be appointed my guardian. I can't understand myself. I dread to meet him tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Nancy questioned in surprise. "Yes. I received a telegram from him this morning. He is to arrive tomorrow." "I wouldn't worry," Nancy said cheerfully. "Probably you will like your guardian when you meet him. Surely your mother wouldn't have entrusted you to his care if she hadn't believed he would be kind to you." "Oh, it's just a silly notion on my part. I realize it, yet I can't rid myself of a feeling that something dreadful will happen to me." Laura Pendleton arose and walked over to the window. She stood gazing out across the lake for a moment, and then resolutely turned and faced Nancy and Helen, who were regarding her anxiously. "You mustn't mind my despondent moods," she told them with a sad smile. "I promise you that if you will come to visit me at my hotel, I'll be more cheerful. Will you come?" "We certainly will," Nancy and Helen declared together. Laura hesitated a moment, and then added rather plaintively, "I wonder, would you mind coming tomorrow?" "Why, no," Nancy responded in astonishment. "We'll be glad to come." Laura's relief was evident. As she said goodbye, she pressed Nancy Drew's hand gratefully. Then, without a word of explanation, she left the two girls. This is your host, Kathryn Lopez Luker. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Stories Come to Life. Be sure to join us next time when we continue to listen to the Bungalow Mystery. You can find a link to our podcast on the Marshall Public Library webpage, www.marshallpl.org. I'll talk to you again soon.